All right, so I'm back, trying a little bit of some different things. This time around, I have obviously changed the lighting a little bit. I thought maybe I'd try it with the lights on this time. And yeah, it's been a minute, and I was like having such a hard time figuring out how to get these mics to work this morning. However, this morning I was listening to Alex Hormozi's podcast, and it was about doing the unscalable until you kind of reach a point where you can start to do the scalable, if that makes sense. And it all came from a quote that he kind of opened with, which is that most people need to be reminded, not taught, or at least that you need to be reminded more than you need to be taught. And it's so funny because recently I've been sort of ignoring basically a high demand skill of mine, which is this automation, integrations, AI, APIs, all that stuff. And it's mostly because I've seen a lot of noise about it on like TikTok and things like that, where like you see a lot of people post about innate inflows and share them. And so I was like, there can't be that much value in these things if they're stuff that just are easily shareable. But then I kind of reflected on my own experience with some of that stuff, and I was like, oh, most of these workflows don't work. Most of these credentials are hard to plug into innate. I mean, for the average individual who hasn't used it much, right? And it's not like any business owner can just pick up and run with innate or know how to apply it. And in recent conversations I've had with other people, like it isn't often easy for businesses to kind of understand what they should be using and what they shouldn't be using in terms of tools. And so it's sort of it is a skill that is incredibly valuable and in high demand. And at the same time, I've even experienced that in my own work, in my own, where I work right now, where I've had skills that have come in and replaced entire things that we do or used to do with AI and automation that continuously get us, new business. And so I almost ignored, what the impact of those things were on my own company that I work for. And at the same time, shied away from doing it for other businesses because of the fact that I feared it was unscalable. And so I was listening to this podcast with Alex Hormozi, and one of the things he talks about is how you should start at the high ticket, high done for you service level and do the unscalable first. And what that does is gain you the knowledge in order to go through and be able to do those things at a more scalable level. Later you earn the resources like the time or the labor or whatever it is to be able to make whatever it is unscalable, scalable. And this AI automations and all that stuff, there wasn't what I thought to be a clear templated approach to being able to do the same thing over and over again and therefore be scalable. And for that reason, I sort of shied away from the idea of trying to pitch those as services, as something to sell to customers. And it's so funny because it's so backwards from where I've come. And again, this goes back to that quote of like, most people need to be reminded, not taught. And when I did my own agency, I did not start out with the most scalable thing in mind. I started with the service-based business and learned how difficult it was to provide a service, right? A full done-for-you sort of suite. But over time, and if you watch some of these other videos, I've talked about this before, I found ways of systematizing, SOP, submission forms, steps to basically simplifying the delivery of that thing to the point where it was sort of done with you. It was moving towards being productized. And I've talked about making a service-based business into a productized offer. And I'm sitting here wondering about how I would sell these skills, and I'm avoiding it because it's not scalable. But in reality, doing what I did in the past, where I start with the unscalable and figure out a way to make it scalable, is the way through, figuring out a way to make a business scalable. And I've said scalable a little too many times already in this video, but it's something that I totally forgot about. It's something I have literally witnessed and experienced myself and gone through a lot of pain, but still forgot. And so, again, it goes back to the quote, like it needs to be something that you always remember. Like every lesson that you have needs to be written down, and part of these videos kind of serve as that, right? Like I was thinking about that this morning, and I was thinking about what he was saying, and I was like, man, no, I've done what he's talking about doing, and I'm ignoring doing that same thing now, even though I had so much come from it. There were so many benefits that came from doing it the unscalable way, talking to customers, learning what they wanted. I literally went through those with the sales calls. Another thing he talked about was like, that a lot of, the best way to solve most business problems is to speak to the customer. So how do you market to customers? You could talk to them and they would tell you exactly how to market to them. What needs to improve about your service, what needs to change, what is it that they're actually interested in when they say that they're interested in another thing. There's a lot of things you can learn just from having conversations about your product. And so, if you do the unscalable, also you can discount it in that what you are discounting and losing in revenue, you are actually gaining in knowledge. I think, Alex says something about that that's kind of similar. And I would highly suggest, like, if you do it for cheap and you kind of get to learn through sort of the mishaps, if it's a very new business. There's also a level of scrutiny that has to be applied to this. Like in the past, I've sort of ignored, conventional wisdom that seems to be wise. Like, for example, Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey gives a lot of advice on never using a credit card, always underwrite your mortgages and things like that. And these are kind of some wild ideas, but you have to remember who he's marketing to. The people who turn to Dave Ramsey are the ones who cannot be responsible with a credit card. They are the ones who have destroyed their credit and have abused, credit lines. And so he doesn't go to that audience and say, well, it's safe to use a credit card here or there. Here's the exceptions. No, you people have gone so far as to ruin it. That's why you're here. We need to make sure that you're on a path where you can't do that again. And so you have to understand the advice he gives to the audience that he's trying to sell to. And the same thing is kind of true of Hormozi. Like, Hormozi is talking to the broadest level of early business owners he possibly can. And so it's not about, going back and starting from ground zero on every new business idea you do, because you take some lessons from each one. It's more about, taking the really positive, really good lessons from each one, implementing them, but also still allowing room to learn. Like, you stay humble and learn through whatever that new process is, because every business is different. It has different pain points and things you have to overcome. There are always solutions to it. The obstacle is the way. You just have to go through that with the mindset that you are going to go through it. It's going to be rough the original time, like the first few times, and it's going to be messy, really, because you don't have systems in place. You don't know how this usually operates. You don't know what the customer usually wants. But again, not starting from ground zero like you would, I think Alex Hormozi, a bit of his information is talking to an audience that is starting from ground zero. And so don't 100% apply that. Like, take the lessons that you've learned before, remind yourself of the important ones. And I think, I've done this in the past where I've kind of had like a sheet in my notes app, and I'll put down quotes that I think I should remind myself to read. And I haven't been too good about this in the past, but like rereading those quotes on a consistent basis, whether that be, on a daily basis or a weekly basis, whatever, repetition sort of distills information and makes it permanent in our mind. And again, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And so we can learn a lesson, and can understand it, make sense to us all day long. But if we don't actually practice it or review it continuously, then it's going to be lost. And so whenever you make those kind of business decisions and you learn from them or whatever, you should document them and save them. This is, for me, this channel is sort of that for myself, and then go back and review them. And what's kind of cool is, like, I've actually found a lot of value in going through my own, like, TikTok or YouTube shorts or whatever, and just scrolling through them. They serve as those daily reminder quotes, and they're so digestible. Most of them are under 30 seconds. I can go through an entire catalog of the best parts of my videos, in probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they're distilled lessons. It serves as my new quotes, in my app or whatever. But yeah, I just kind of want to talk about that point because it makes so much sense. Lesson one being, don't focus on the scalable early on, especially if you're brand new to business. The other thing is you need to be reminded far more than you need to be taught. And so always find a way to kind of review the lessons that you've learned, especially if they're learned the hard way. And yeah, start with, high service, difficult to deliver things. And over time, the ways to make that more productized and more scalable will reveal themselves, or you will earn the capital, whatever it is, to hire the labor or to invest in systems to sort of offset that time cost. But yeah, that's sort of a short video for today. I just kind of wanted to share that bit of information. If you guys ever have any questions about marketing or business or anything like that, I've kind of gone through a couple of mishaps and missteps, and so I've learned a couple of things, and I'd be happy to share any of that information with you guys so you don't have to make those mistakes. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks. All right, bye.